welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast. So excited you are here. I know that you love to poke fun at my intro, Ryan, because it breaks the mic. Is that what
it does? It's the loudest thing in the podcast every time.
Well, I'm trying to wake these people up. They're driving. They're on their lawnmowers, mowing their grass. They are laying on maybe on their bed, trying to just soak up some wisdom.
Yeah.
I know that for me, a podcast is normally a leisure activity, and so that intro is very key for me.
Yeah.
Maybe not as key as I want to pretend like it is. But
I usually listen like on a bike ride, on my riding lawnmower.
Yep.
So welcome everyone on your lawnmower.
Well, we're now mowing our grass because it's warm enough again.
Yeah.
Although in Missouri, it seems to jump from about 95 to about 35 in about 6 hours.
Yep.
So we'll see which day it is when you're listening to this. Well, this is episode 51. If you missed our episode 50 that we just put out this last week before Easter, I think it's a treat. I think it's one of our best episodes. It's definitely one of the ones that I enjoyed making the most. Ryan had put in some time the year before into studying atonement theories, and so you willingly broke down a few of them and drug me along, allowed me to just kind of be the question guy, and I really enjoyed it. And I think you have a few more that at some point we may jump back into that topic.
Yeah, we got a lot of great feedback on it, and I'd love to circle back around.
I think it'd be a great one to do again. It was a lot
of fun.
It really was, and I am still reading Between Two Trees by Shane Wood, and I'm enjoying it, and it's one of those, like, it's put me on a path to, some neat questions. Yeah. So today, though, we are going to jump into a topic that I think both of us, I kind of brought it up a couple days ago, and we've had several conversations in the hallway, and then even right before we started, I think it's a topic that is a healthy discussion every now and then. I think it's a healthy discussion over the course of your faith, and I definitely think it's something that at the beginning and as you're going, continuing to learn about is really, really important. So it's the discussion on baptism.
Yeah.
We are a part of the non-denominational Christian tradition.
Yes.
So
the Bartonstone frontier. How many more words can we throw on this?
It's one of those, like, as you study church history, you'll figure out, like, what are we? Yeah, we are a lot of things.
What we were was an interdenominational church hangout group.
Yeah.
That eventually people were like, oh, you're a part of it was Disciples of Christ only back then. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, you're a part of that? Well, you're not a Presbyterian anymore. Kicked out.
Yep.
And we didn't want to be our own church, but now we are.
Now we are. Yeah.
All it took was 15 years or so. I don't know.
It's one of those, like, I think it's one of those movements too that because it doesn't have an attachment to a larger body of kind of codes or, what we would call theological kind of staples or foundations.
Yeah. There's no dogmatic thing that binds our churches together other than the major stuff like Jesus, he rose again. He's Lord of all creation.
Yes. And there's lots of things that even in our discussions when we have those with, like, people that are joining or choosing to make Kingsway their home, I've kind of stolen this for several different pastors, but they use the kind of illustration of, like, there's a few things that I would hold with a closed fist that I would fight you on. Yeah. And that's like, Jesus is Lord. He rose from the grave. He needs to be number one. He's the only way, And there are lots of things with an open hand that I think are open for discussion.
Yeah.
That we need to figure out and walk through. So I guess what the discussion is for today is, like, many questions come to my mind, and I don't know if you're listening to this podcast today and you're going, like, I have baptism completely figured out and I've thought through it completely and I know exactly where I stand. Maybe some of you are listening to this and you grew up in a different denomination or a different teaching or a different understanding of baptism, and you've slowly kind of been learning maybe the different ways that baptism can kind of show up. Maybe some of you've heard it said a lot, you've heard it talked about, but you've never really had a discussion or researched any. And I think for today, we want to kind of preface our discussion, and Ryan and I were really, we weren't scared. I won't say scared, but
I was a little scared.
All right, maybe I'm scared. I think scared is a bad way. I think what we don't want is to chase people away, and what we don't want is to discourage people, maybe in what they currently believe. But what we want is to provide a healthy place to have good discussions about these things. And certain topics like this, sometimes because they can have some deep emotions attached to them and deep convictions attached to them can be a little bit tricky to talk about. And I know for you and I, we want to be willing to have those discussions because I think they're worthy of our time. I think they're worthy of our discussion because it helps give depth. It helps gives real footing and foundations to our faith, but I think it also helps us learn and grow. So let's start with this. When we think about baptism, like what comes to your mind, and like thinking about where you grew up, how you grew up, like when you first learned about what this idea of like getting to swim in church, like what came to your mind or what comes to your mind thinking about the original kind of thought processes around baptism?
So I grew up in church, but my church, I think since like I was 3 years old, from about 3 years old to like 13, 14. So most of the time I would have been learning by experience and by being around. We were a mobile church. So we met in a high school. Yeah. We met in a community center. And the community center was probably where we met most, like the longest and during like my early teenage, like older kid years. And so there's no baptistry in the meeting room we had, but they did have a pool. And so I didn't watch a lot of baptisms because they were outside of the service. It was like everybody leave the service, finger quotes, and go over to the pool so we can baptize somebody. So us and some of the other kids would just like hang out and eat snacks and whatever and not really go in there. Yeah. When I first like learned about baptism and saw it in action was like maybe 9 or 10. I think I got baptized at 11. So when I think about baptism, I think about me and my youth minister going to that pool, to the shallow end where we could kind of stand up and it only be to like my shoulders or a little below, and watching like bleachers full of people going up, say my confession, like watching them watching me say my confession of faith and get baptized. And and the post-baptism hug is the greatest thing on the planet. That's what I think about when I think about baptism.
And my experience is not far off of that, and I think there's a lot of people that maybe have different ones, but it's funny that ours are similar. I grew up in a non-denominational Christian church. I never grew up in anything different. I didn't know anything different coming to the Midwest, and then being around even my wife who grew up in the non-instrumental Church of Christ. Like we were having discussions on this, and I was like, wait, what? Like it's very different. But mine was very similar. Like I got baptized at 10. We celebrated my baptism every year. Like when it came around, my mom would buy me a new Bible or, whatever, but it was very similar. Like we had a baptism in our church though, because we had a building and it was off to the side, and it would just be like in the middle of the worship service or right before a sermon. All of a sudden the curtains would draw and then everybody would look over and there's the people in the white robes and, and then we would say the 3 questions, do you believe Jesus? Do you believe you're a sinner? Do you believe Jesus died and rose again for you? Do you want to make him the Lord of your life? Awesome. And under the water, baptized in his death, awakened in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
I like that. That's a little more deep and a little more thorough than mine was, because no white robes. We didn't bring those in to mobile church. Yep. And all they asked was, do you believe, like the just one question, good confession kind of thing. Do you believe that Jesus is... How am I forgetting this? I'm fired immediately.
No. But let's say, I know for us, it's like, do you believe Jesus is God? Do you believe he died? Do you believe he rose from the grave? Do you believe you're a sinner and you need, what I mean?
Yeah.
Accept. And, for me, it was my youth pastor used, do you want to make him the boss of your life? And I always was like, Lord, I mean, like the boss is like, it's like, I don't have to listen to you. I need a day off, type language when I got older. So if that's our tradition, why then, if we're unified, does it make talking about this so challenging?
Yeah.
And I think what I alluded to here just a second ago is that when I came into contact with people that had different understandings or different experiences, maybe the Catholicism, Lutheran or Methodist background, had been baptized as a baby or as a child in front of the whole, and then now they're an adult and then are our church, and I'm asking them to get baptized, and they're like, do I need to baptize again? How many times do I need to be dunked? And then the standard, like, I got baptized when I was young, and now I'm older, and I realize what it is now, and I didn't walk with Jesus for the last 10 years. Do I need to get like rebaptized? Like, how
That's
do
a big question.
you know, like, what do I need to do with that? And like, is there a right and wrong way to do this? Like, you know, and I think that's ultimately what you run up against. It's like, why do we need to get baptized? Is there a right and wrong way to do it? Do I need to get rebaptized? Maybe those are the three things that we need to just talk through real quick. So the first one is, you know, like, why do I need to get baptized? Why is baptism important?
I think one of the reasons that I was personally scared to talk about it at the beginning, then we had a conversation yesterday and I felt better, is in my tradition, I think in your tradition, I think in the college we went to, which I love and respect and admire, the baptism is tied to salvation.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's wrong. But because it's tied to salvation, you want to get it right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are trying to get it right and doing different things.
And that can be scary when you're talking about salvation.
It's like, are you a Christian or not? Are you saved or not? And they tie that question to baptism. Like, oh, you just got sprinkled. Does that affect your salvation or not?
And just to be clear, like when we were talking about it yesterday, I think it's healthy because, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, what do you mean by salvation? Like, maybe you're learning a lot. Like genuinely, like, what you're pulling off of and what our tradition is kind of Matthew 28, 19 and 20. It's this thing that Jesus told his followers to do. One of the last things he told them to do. So it's called the Great Commission, you know, is go out into the world and baptize.
And make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father.
And so like this language in there is like so tied to like exactly what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. The whole process is a devout Christian goes out and will find somebody who's not a devout Christian.
Yep.
And will try to pull them into Christianity, not out of any selfish or weird motives, but simply because it is the greatest thing.
It's like one person who's hungry that has bread.
Yeah.
Offering bread to the next person that's hungry.
Yeah. The person going out to those people is not better than them. It's not they are not incomplete and need the gospel and need Christianity and need salvation because they're fill in the blank. They need it because they're a human being and it ties into sin, which easily defined as like rebellion against God.
Absolutely.
Salvation and like the hope of all eternity is that we would be reunited with God in a perfect community. It's not to sit on a cloud and play a harp forever. I'd have to learn the harp first.
Oh my gosh.
But it's to
maybe I'll need eternity.
It's like if you've ever, maybe your family was this way, or maybe you visited a friend's house that was this way, that was just so inviting and not weird.
Yeah.
Like they didn't need small talk. They knew they like cared about each other. They were interested in you. They valued you. Imagine that, but forever and without any flaws. That's like the goal. We have our path to that, and we desperately want other people to have that.
I agree.
That's salvation. That's like
absolutely.
We want to bring you into.
And that's what I so struggle with when this discussion comes up, because that's what draws these discussions to become a little bit more difficult because people are going, that's the key, right? Like if we don't get them wet and if they don't get dunked, they don't get in.
Yeah.
And, you know, the thing that we've talked about before on this podcast, that maybe not with you, but it's like, can you define the moment when salvation occurs? You know, it's like in the moment when you believe. Is it the moment when you turn back? Is it the moment you surrender your life and like give Jesus the wheel? You know, is it or is it when you come up out of the water? Hey, someone's calling us. How nice of them to call us in the middle of the podcast. Hold on just a second. Hush, phone. I think the brilliancy of what we're talking about too, good job, Ryan, you nailed that, is we want to not run past that or ignore that that's a part of this. What we want to say is that baptism is more than what most of the time we think about.
Yeah.
And what I loved about our little discussion that I want to repeat here now is, what was the part of maybe baptism that wasn't emphasized that you have grown into understanding of, that you wish more people thought about? And why maybe baptism is a little bit more broad and a lot more maybe communal than we thought.
Yeah. So what you were leaning toward is what I was going to say. Is so like I grew up with this understanding of baptism. My best friend growing up was Catholic, and he started going to my youth group, and that brought up a lot of weird questions. Well, I got baptized as an infant. What does that mean? Do I need to be rebaptized? And all this stuff. He came from that tradition, from the Catholic tradition, and did not really understand it super well. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to go through confirmation classes and all that, but I don't know that he understood it well enough. He understood it well enough to know that he was baptized and like some like churchy answers about it. But what I love about that tradition, even though I think the way we do it is better, what I love about that tradition is it's communal. Here's what I mean by that. So they view baptism like ancient Israel viewed circumcision. It marks you as a member of the community. Mm. Everybody there's baptized. When you get baptized, for them it's still about salvation, but it's mostly about bringing you into the community in the present.
Yeah.
I was talking about salvation as bringing you into the eternal community after we die. Yeah. Whenever. But for them, it's like, no, you're a part of the community now because you got baptized. Does it mean you're perfectly holy and you can't sin and like no. It just marks you as a member of the community. And here's the coolest part. When they walk into their church, they walk in. If you've ever been to a Catholic church, you've seen this happen. There's that little like bowl or pool of water kind of about waist high at the front of the building when you walk in, and you dip your fingers in it and you make the sign of the cross on your forehead and your chest and your shoulders. That's their baptistry. So when they walk in, they dip their hands in the baptismal waters, reminding them of their own baptism, their own commitment to this group of people and to God's kingdom. Yeah. They dip their fingers in that water, and everybody else dips their fingers in that water. So they're reminding them that like everybody there's baptized if you dip your fingers in the water. And then they do the sign of the cross, touching that cold water on their fingers to their forehead, like in a tactile way, a touch kind of way, reminding them of their commitment. Those two elements, the communal element and the like covenant commitment element, are things that I didn't think about baptism until
absolutely
4 years ago.
And it's a remembrance thing. Like, yeah, I mean, every time someone's baptized, I think about my own baptism.
Yeah.
Like that is definitely a thing. But to have it be a remembrance every single week like that is a very cool idea. Like that concept to me is, you know, a neat way of me going like, I remember that I chose to do this.
Yeah.
You know, now for them, obviously as an infant, it wasn't their choice. And that is one of the bigger questions that, you know, we have. But I love when we had that discussion yesterday. I'm so glad that you brought it back up because it definitely was something I went home thinking about where I was like, man, the power of that, of like, the welcoming power to know that you have been brought into the community before you've made all the choices and the decisions is a powerful thing to say, no, you're welcomed in, like you were in, you know, and then I think that's where I would go the next step that I would say, then your personal choice is the next thing. And that's where I kind of made the distinction yesterday where I would say, any parent that has baptized their child as an infant or as, you know, as a young child before the child really has the decision laid in front of them, that is a beautiful gift that the parent has given to the child to say that this is how we want to raise you. This is the community we want you to grow up in. This is what we long for you to experience with God.
Yeah.
And if it's seen that way and it's felt that way in my heart, I want that for my kids too. Right.
Yeah.
But it feels like an arranged marriage.
Yeah.
And at some point, if that relationship that they want for you or promise to you or hope for you doesn't turn into actual love and commitment into your own heart and doesn't show itself in actually a ceremony that you play a part in, that you choose to participate in, I think it doesn't go to that salvation side, right?
Yeah. I would agree with that baptism by itself, especially in some of those, so I'd say high church traditions. What I mean by that is like it looks really formal. There's like stained glass and pictures, and that could be honestly what I just described could be in Church of Christ. Yeah. But like the stone buildings that look like a castle.
Yeah.
If it's kind of like that, it could be a high church tradition. They may wear robes, that, like candles and like that kind of tradition. For them, if you baptize it as an infant, I don't know. I'm not confident that alone saves you. If you get baptized as an infant and then go off and like never actually learn about Jesus.
And I think that's a great transition into this concept of, is baptism absolutely necessary for salvation? And that is a tricky answer.
Yes, it is a tricky answer.
I would say, and I know for some of you out here, and this is maybe my proposal that we should have said at the very beginning, but like, we want to have dialogue on this. So
yeah,
you're like, listening to this, and you're like, hey, I want to quote some scripture to you, and I want to talk. Like, listen, we are all about that. Like, we were talking about the Egyptian eunuch that, was like, hey, here's some water. Ethiopian, thank you, African. Yeah. And, and he was like, here's some water. Let's do this. Let's, why wouldn't I be baptized now? Out of the book of Isaiah. It's like, I go from Isaiah into like Jesus stuff. And he's like, yeah, right. Like right now. Yes. Like right now.
Yeah.
And, obviously there's some communal sides of that. So like you can tell he's like, I want to be in this group. Yeah. But then I think there's also some like salvation sides of things where he's like, I want to fully commit, and I want that thing that Jesus is offering. I don't think baptism is necessary for salvation.
I would agree, kind of. I think so. Back to atonement theories for a second.
Let's go. Growing up, we're going down the wall, and I want to. Yeah. I'll have some more to say in a second. Yeah, but that's my blanket statement. To get this discussion started.
I would agree with that blanket statement in certain areas when you apply it in certain ways. So, I grew up, and I think a lot of us grew up, understanding atonement as a very legal thing. Jesus died for you legally. Yeah. So some behind the scenes, like black and white stuff happened, and now you're free. Doesn't matter what you do today. Like that's kind of the impression I got. So when I came to baptism, it was like, what you were just talking, where do we draw the line? Where's salvation at? Is it when you confess? Is it when you turn back? Is it when you get baptized? And that question, I think, asks another question. Where are God's hands tied to when somebody is saved?
Absolutely.
And I think that is a faulty question.
That's a faulty question.
So that's why I agree with you.
Yes.
Is baptism necessary for salvation? No, because the way I would rephrase that is, are God's hands tied to where he cannot save somebody unless they've been baptized? I'd say no.
And I want to make sure I quickly preface this, because some people just paused the video and just wrote the worst email ever if they didn't finish this discussion. So please listen to the end, because I want to make that blanket statement, because I believe when I hear statements like C.S. Lewis that says, if God can condemn with 1 ounce of sin, then surely he can save with 1 ounce of faith. I believe that, because I don't think God's hands are tied. The same, and the secondary sentence that I would say after salvation is not necessary, or baptism is not necessary for salvation, I would tell you, but it's absolutely beneficial to do it.
Yeah, I think I would phrase it as, I think intent toward baptism is essential. And what I mean by that is, like, if you just heard about Jesus and like faith sparked in your heart and you're like, I want to know more, and then you get hit by a bus. Like, I don't think God's like, well, he didn't get baptized. Sure. He's too dry. Can't take him.
And what?
But like, if you hear that and that's it, and you turn around, or if you hear that and you go to church and nothing in your life changes, and you don't and you don't ever actively like worship Jesus, or like give away your life in a, I'm crucifying myself with Jesus. I'm pruning my life. I'm changing how my actions are and my thoughts. If you like hear about Jesus and are interested, and then just sit around Christians and are like, I don't want to get baptized, that seems like too committal. No, I don't know if God's hands are tied, but like we talked about in some of the atonement theories thing, like, it isn't just a black or white, you cross this line, you're done. I think on the books episode, I talked about salvation by allegiance alone, that book. And I think that allegiance is that driving force that would lead you to baptism.
Absolutely. And that's what I would say. Any person that's genuinely following Jesus, that reads the Bible and reads Acts chapter 2, right? And it's like, Peter's like, hey, this is, you killed Jesus, like, come back. And they're like, people are cut to the heart, is what it says. And then they say, what should we do? And what does Peter say? Like, repent. and be baptized.
Yeah.
Like that's like his two things. He's like, yeah, turn back from what you're doing. You've rebelled from God is what repentance is.
Yeah.
Turn your thoughts, turn your way, put your eyes back on Jesus and be baptized.
Yeah.
Now, that ties so beautifully into covenant language because that would be the Jewish side of things too, where they would come and they would go, Allah or God is one, the Lord is one, and then they would say the Shema, and then they would be circumcised.
Yeah.
And so, like that is exactly what would happen. And it is a part of the process. I always say, if you're not willing to stand up and be baptized in front of a group of people that love and care about you, your faith will struggle.
Yeah.
It will struggle to get off the ground because that is one of the easiest things to do because those people are for you.
Yeah. Those people already are usually baptized themselves and aren't like, what's baptism?
They're excited for you.
So, yeah.
So I think I guess that's my mindset where, of course, the thief on the cross doesn't, Jesus doesn't like try to spit on him to get him baptized before he like.
Here's some holy water.
but like, I think he's legitimately like, you're going to be with me today in heaven. Like, the paradise. Like that is, how is that not salvation language? Like, you know what I mean? And so in my mind, I just go like, God's hands aren't tied to baptism. However, I think Jesus himself was baptized. He asked us to do it because he believes it's a part of a healthy growth. And a part of a healthy process for salvation, for faith. And I think he intentionally left it as something that we're supposed to do.
I think it's important because Jesus cares about it. This is just what you're saying. It's important because it's an issue over which Jesus' heart breaks. It's not important because the water is magic or the water is the finish line and I dove over the water, one hand got in and then I died. Like I made it, my hand's in heaven.
I'm imagining that in a movie now. I'm like, no.
The slow-mo.
Like Hercules. Like just like, yep, he didn't make it.
Yeah.
I mean, Grant Agler, who used to be the senior pastor at Kingsway years ago, used to say if all it was the water, we would fill up every truck in the parking lot and go dunk everyone we could in the name of Jesus, and we would get a bunch of people into heaven today. Obviously it's a heart change that's reflected externally, right?
Yeah.
It's an inward change expressed externally in an outward expression of baptism.
Yeah.
If that inward change is not happening, baptism too can be completely false. It's if you're just doing it for the wrong reasons, that's not a part of the process either.
It's not a guarantee. At the church I was at before, we had somebody call the office and want to talk to one of the pastors, and they wanted to get baptized. They never went to our church. They told us they would not go to our church. They wanted to get baptized in a private baptism with nobody else around. And when we were like, we'll need you to go to our baptism class, they were like, no, I just need to get baptized.
Yeah.
We didn't love that. Well, because that's baptism as a magic potion.
Yes.
Rather than as a step in the process of giving your life over to Jesus, of allegiance, of love.
Yes.
Yeah. It was totally separate from that.
And I think that's where we need to end this. So, we're coming off of Easter. We're talking about the journey of hope right now in a current series. And I've already had a couple people ask and are going to be getting baptized. And so I guess that's where I want to end the discussion. Like, who needs to be baptized? Like, how do you know? Like, when it's time?
Oh, okay. Who needs to is everybody.
Everybody. But I'm saying, like, when and how do you know you're ready? So
I'm getting a call with the answer right now. Now, who needs to be baptized? So I'm going to tell the story, and it's going to tie in.
Yeah,
I promise.
No, do it. I love it.
So Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, that thing we talked about, where
Yes.
you read Isaiah 53, and then he's like, talks about Jesus, and he's like, what should stop me from being baptized right now? And they get baptized.
Yeah.
That's Acts chapter 8. That's probably like AD 40.
Yeah, I was going to say it's somewhere around
Jesus has been dead and resurrected and ascended for a couple years at least.
And then they've been persecuted enough that they've started to spread.
Yeah.
So it'd take a little time.
Rome is like the empire that controls everything. They're not happy with Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
By the year 200, in which Rome is still not loving Christianity and won't be for 100 years, here's the process for baptism. You get brought to a church or find out about the Lord or get evangelized to. And you're like, I want to take the next steps. And they say, okay. And you get put in classes and like you're an apprentice for baptism for years, up to like 2.5, 3 years. They're keeping it from you. And you're an apprentice for baptism for 2.5, 3 years. They're really testing you and scrutinizing. And then when you get baptized, like you get baptized on Easter because that's the day that Jesus resurrected. You're identifying with him in your baptism. And you have to stand there. This is my favorite part. I'm pretty sure butt naked, like in the baptistry.
Goodness.
And they're berating you with questions. They're like, do you believe that Jesus is God? And you're like, yes, and you're cold. And they're like, do you believe that he's the Lord of all creation? And you're like, yes. They're like, do you renounce the devil and all his works? And you're like, yeah. And and it's so hard to get baptized.
Gosh, I can't imagine that.
If they're close enough to where somebody in those churches knew one of the living apostles, or maybe their dad knew one of the living apostles. Because John lived to like 90. I don't know. So maybe a couple generations away. They're not like far away from the core of Christianity.
And they're struggling.
But they're like testing people.
Gosh.
They're holding people back. I'm not saying we're going to do that now. Definitely not. Please get baptized clothed. but like there is a side to it that's like, what should stop me? And there's another side to it that's like,
yeah. Are you ready?
Are you ready? How much will you give up to get baptized?
Yeah.
And I think I don't know what like question and answer will prove to you that somebody's at that point.
For sure.
But like how important is Jesus to you? That's a question you have to ask before you get baptized.
And I think there's a balance. And obviously like that story, I think over exaggerates how like sometimes we're so flippant with it, right? Where we're just kind of like, you come in, you hear one message and you're like, sweet. And you feel like the Ethiopian guy and you're just like, yeah, water, good, I'm done. And then we never talk to you again, right? Like, you know, and then you like go away and you're like, all right, whatever. And in some ways, I do know that God works like that.
Yeah.
Like I really do believe that God sometimes that's exactly how he works. But I also know that in the Midwest, especially with family pressure and social pressure and feeling like, you know, you're not there yet, but you need to be. And so like, why wouldn't you just go ahead and do it? Kids especially can feel that way.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, if you grew up in a Christian home, I know I felt that. You know, my dad and my mom, they weren't ever intentionally just like, you know, you need to be baptized. But you watch people, you're listening to people, you're hearing it over and over again. You hear how important it is, and then you're like, well, I guess at some point, you know, I should do this. You know, where I go on this is always this. Like, if anybody out there has watched someone get married, or if you've been married, or if you are married, the process to picking a bride and then going down the aisle, or you know, standing in front and watching them like come down the aisle, like making this happen and going through that is incredibly intense.
Yeah,
some of them are Vegas weddings, but some of them are incredibly extravagant, and they take time to plan, and it's a really built up moment, and it's very special. But I've been to lots of weddings where all the pomp and circumstance is there, but the relationship isn't genuine.
Yeah.
You know, and like you can just tell there's just a little bit something off.
They're treating marriage and their wedding like a magic potion.
Yes.
To cure their own loneliness or their own
or
their own shame about not being married this late in life, or
yes, and it feels, you're like, oh, I hope it works. You know, and I as much as I can say, like there's a part of me that wants every person that chooses to get baptized to have that spur of the moment passion and excitement, but also a level of understanding that makes them cherish what they're doing with the right heart.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm always a huge proponent of like, I don't want to ever put fear in someone to scare them into baptism.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that, but I also don't want to chase them away from it, because I do feel like it's a beautiful thing to kind of help spur you to recognizing that this is a big deal. And like, this is a big step.
Yeah. And I think what one of the biggest things I like about how baptism worked back then is you, in that story I told with the like 3 years and the do you renounce Satan or whatever, you were like an apprentice, which meant you had a person over you. You had like I don't know what the word is, but like somebody walking with you along your Christian faith. And that's what I love about what we talked about yesterday is you were talking about how you don't like baptizing people yourself if you're not like the person they're close to. You want a parent or a friend or somebody who's going to be there for their whole life to walk with them. That baptism is it's not the finish line, it's the starting line. Maybe not the starting line, but it's like a commitment line that says from here on out, I'm going to like aim my life this way, and everybody here is going to hold me accountable to doing that and to being that way and to being this person I'm committing to be today.
And that's why I love the marriage idea, and that's why I keep bringing it back, because like the marriage isn't the beginning of the relationship, right? Like, but it is a cornerstone, and
it's certainly not the end.
No,
like people who think like I just got married and now I can give up and like get fat. We're probably the two wrong people to talk about that too. But like now I can give up. I don't have to try. I don't have to like. People have talked about continuing to date your wife, like continue to show them that value. Show them, that's the same with baptism. You can't cross the line of baptism and give up.
Oh my gosh! Imagine the next day you're like, "We did it, babe. We're out. All right." You know, like, that's it. That's over. I think that drawing back to why we talked about yesterday, I think that did give you comfort, and I know that was a part of the conversation where the kind of the things I think became to where this conversation is important. You know, like I can tell you the baptismo means to dip or to, you know, to completely plunge or submerge. I can tell you that that's why we choose to do baptism in the way that we do. I can tell you that the baptism was something that Jesus chose to do and chose to command his. I can tell you that it's an important part of the process because Jesus commanded us to go out into the world and do it. But I can also tell you that it can be something that can be so intimidating, so frustrating, and it's sometimes a linchpin to just people feeling like they're off the hook for the rest of their relationship. And that's part of the reason why when I read Acts 2 and I read that 5,000 people or whatever, 3,000? 3,000? 3,000?
That sounds right.
Anyway, came to Christ in one moment. I remember when I was taught that at OCC, there were like 12 people or 40 people baptizing 3,000 people would take forever. You know what they probably did? Is they probably had someone baptized and then turn around and baptize the next person behind them.
Yeah.
Because they're like, hey, let's just spread this out. You know, it's like, let's get this going. And the most powerful thing that I've experienced is baptizing someone. You mentioned that hug after you baptize someone.
That is pure.
It's pure
dopamine.
Heaven. It's pure heaven, man. Like, I don't know how else to say it. It's pure heaven. It is. And that's why when I say I want a family member or a wife or a husband or a father or a mom or a grandparent or a friend to baptize, I want them to feel that. I want them to have that moment where they're at that covenant, communal, you know, grace-filled, life-filled moment in their hands. God is using them in that moment to bring about this incredible expression. And I think it's life-changing. And like I said to you yesterday, I think it's amazing when that person has the position then in year 2 or year 3 when they look at him and go, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
I remember about you're growing and I'm proud of you. It also holds you accountable. Yeah. You're like, I'm baptizing people. I got to like get my act together. I got to like remember I'm a part of the community of God. I'm an ambassador of Christ. You know, and then it also, when people stumble. Yeah. You're like, you baptized me. Like, I know you have real faith. Or I baptize you. Like, I remember your faith. Very Paul, you know, Timothy type idea. Yeah. And to me, that's how the church moves forward. It's not pastors baptizing everyone. It's not one position that's better than it's us all recognizing that we're all tied communally, like you said, like the water that we remember that we all started right here. Yeah. In the same place. And we're moving forward. It's not perfection. It's a part of the journey. And
yeah, and I think that's why like sometimes fathers or different people in people's lives can be scared to baptize people because they're like, oh, you want me to baptize them? What does that say about my faith? Has my faith been stagnant? Because if you're calling me to that, it's going to need to start flowing out of me into this person. It's going to need to start being active again. And that might hurt a little bit. That might expose some of the like rust and corrosion of my faith being stagnant. And
it's amazing how that calls that out of people, though.
But isn't that better?
Yes.
Than staying stagnant and
The worst fear I have is like I had multiple times when I started at a church that didn't allow that and that made pastors baptize everyone. Is I had these teenagers that were coming up to me years later as young adults that were like, "Man, you baptized me," and I didn't even remember their name.
Yeah.
And I felt awful about it. Like I was like, "No, like this can't be the way. Like this cannot be the best way." And so that's the journey I've been on to kind of go like this. Let's reclaim this in the way that I felt like, every person is supposed to baptize.
Yeah.
Every person is supposed to be a part of like, an accountability or a part of making disciples, making that happen. Well, I will tell you this, whether you have a small child that's asking a lot of questions, I know John Flowers has an incredible handout that he gives to parents that helps them kind of walk through. Perfect example of baptism is like John's gospel doesn't mention it once.
Yeah.
And like he, at the very end in chapter 20 is like, I wrote this whole thing so you'll believe. No mention of baptism at all.
Yeah.
Which always is like, to me, I'm just like, what? None at all. But I would tell you, John would tell you to be baptized. And I think 1 John kind of leads you to that covenant relationship idea a lot.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of you taking your next step and expressing things and recognizing that you can fully fall in love with Jesus, but come to the wedding, like make this expression public, make it communal, invite someone close into your, in your life to partner with you to walk. I think baptism's a beautiful gift in that way, and it's a part of the process. Any last comments as maybe you are listening and you're wanting to get baptized, please email us. We'd love to talk more about this or break this down. If you were baptized as a young person and you feel like you're like, what do I do now? I would tell you, if you were baptized in a place where you made the decision, maybe at 15, 16, years old, now you're in your 20s, your 30s, and you're like, I haven't walked with Jesus for 20 years. Do I need to be rebaptized? What I would tell you is no. But it sometimes can be like where people do their do their vows again.
Yeah,
like it can be a healthy symbolism, but it's not necessarily the same.
You don't need to spend another $30,000 on another wedding.
No, but to come in and have it be a symbolic thing, sure, like that sounds great. But it's not necessary. But it's definitely sometimes beneficial. If it's something that you feel like would help you take your next steps. But that's not something like every week when you mess up, you like come back in, you're like, well, time to get wet again. Like, I don't think that's a part of the process. I think we all make mistakes. I don't think any of us are perfect. That's not what baptism's about.
Yeah.
And then the person that's waiting to get baptized for the first time, I'd love to sit down with you and chat. We have a Meet Kingsway class after church this Sunday. So, if like that's what that's for, is to kind of have those questions, have a chance to talk, have a chance to learn. And that way we can try to get the baptism warm when you come, so it's not
freezing.
I mean, any thoughts in closing, Ryan? Anything you're thinking that we've talked through that maybe we need to clarify? Or anything?
There was a thing or two that I was like, that might be confusing if we leave it unsaid, and I've forgotten all of them.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm sure there was. This is an open discussion. We don't have any notes. We're not planning this out. It's more just us going, this is worthy of our time. There's so many scriptures and so many things that we probably didn't mention that we could have, but it's evident in the book of Acts. Every conversion is almost always partnered with baptism. You can tell that they are very much so seeing that as a part of the conversion. But it's one of those things that I think it's worthy of our conversation to see. It's more than just salvation. It's more than just this check on the bedpost to say that I've done it. I think it's a lot more communal than we've than we've been naturally taught. And I think it's healthy for people to see it as like, I need this because it's a part of me, not just personally attaching myself to Jesus, but also communally attaching myself to the community of the kingdom of God, and then expressing that to them and inviting myself into that.
Yeah.
So I think that I love that way that you described that when we talked about it, even in the first century, where it's like, I love the Catholic side of it, that the liturgical side that I haven't been a part of at all, that I think has some beauty in it.
Yeah, the like remembrance part, and the dipping your fingers in the water.
Yes, and I think that's something that I think there's beauty in that. I really do.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you so much for paying attention and watching, and again, or listening. If you found this beneficial, or if you want to check out more content, feel free to subscribe, or if you felt like this helped you in any way, click that like button.
Yeah.
Helps us get out to more people. Maybe even send this discussion to somebody that maybe you're like, hey, this was helpful, or is this even accurate, or, whatever. Be nice in the comments, and, give us places to learn and grow. This is all about this, and we'll give you space to learn and grow, and we'll learn and grow together. And I don't think anybody has a cornerstone on complete understanding on every topic, and we're just trying to take the next steps and help others too as well. So, hey, thanks so much for watching today and listening. Have a great, glorious day in the Lord. See you later.
See ya.